Tensions in Westminster, they have reached fever pitch over this ongoing crisis in the Middle East.
Yeah, ahead of planned pro-Palestinian protests this weekend, a row has broken out between the government and the Metropolitan Police over whether the march on Saturday should be banned. Now, the Met's Commissioner, Mark Rowley, insisted the protests do not meet the threshold for serious disorder.
He's based that on intelligence. Well, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, met with Mr Rowley to discuss the situation, and he made clear that after their meeting, he said the buck is very much stopping with him.
Yeah, this is a decision that the Metropolitan Police Commissioner has made, and he has said that he can ensure that he safeguards remembrance for the country this weekend, as well as keep the public safe. Now, my job is to hold him accountable for that, and we've asked the police for information on how they will ensure that this happens.
Well, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has also launched a stinging critique of the police this morning, accusing them of having double standards and playing favourites with protesters.
Well, the Home Secretary's comments have been met with plenty of criticism. The Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, posted on X, calling Suella Braverman out of control.
Cooper also branded Braverman's article as highly irresponsible, a dangerous attempt to undermine respect for police at a sensitive time.
But division isn't just isolated to the Conservatives. Sir Keir Starmer's still under pressure over his position on a ceasefire in Gaza.
Yeah, after the first shadow cabinet resignation over the issue, more than a dozen Labour MPs have since tried to force a vote in the Commons over a ceasefire, tabling an amendment to the King's speech, calling on the government to press for a truce.
Well, joining us now is local government editor at Conservative Home, Harry Phibbs. Good morning to you, Harry. Should we start with Suella Braverman? It certainly seems as though she's becoming a bit of a divisive character, even within cabinet ministers. We've seen lots of them saying that they wouldn't use the language that she's chosen. She's doubled down on it in an article in the Times today. I suppose the question is this getting sign-off from the Prime Minister? One assumes so.
Oh yes, now all these speeches and articles by cabinet ministers, there's a process whereby Downing Street are notified and would have signed off. I thought it was an interesting piece from Suella Braverman in the Times this morning. There's been a lot of discussion about the right to protest and whether that should be unlimited or whether there needs to be constraints if people are inciting in violence or supporting terrorism. Then that right shouldn't be allowed, and of course also that the right to protest shouldn't be allowed to disrupt people going about their daily lives. So it's not an unlimited right. But the point that Suella Braverman was focusing on today was that whatever you allow in terms of free speech and protest, it should be even-handed. And the concern is that the police aren't maintaining equality before the law if they're more indulgent towards one group. She gave the example of Black Lives Matter, where, of course, during the lockdown, there weren't supposed to be any marches at all, and Black Lives Matter were allowed to go ahead, and that was a highly controversial group. I mean, there was a lot of virtue signaling celebrity support for them, but they're actually pretty extreme, anti-police, attacking white people, vandalising things, vandalising statues and whatever. So the idea that the police should give special treatment to a group like that, and that other activities should not be allowed, shows a failure to have equality before the law. So I think she's onto something with that point.
Well, except it's not just about what these people are saying or what they stand for when there's a protest. It's how safely the police can police it. Now, that Black Lives Matter during lockdown was a huge event. Trying to shut that down would have been problematic. And the same goes for this, doesn't there? And I mean, from what we understand, it's happening on Saturday. The National Day of Commemoration is actually Sunday. It's not going anywhere near the cenotaph. There's no sign that there's going to be a lot of violence. There's been very few arrests in any of the other protests. So it's difficult to know quite how the police would justify stopping this, isn't it?
Well, I think one point of justifying something is if it's regarded as, I mean, Suella Braverman talking about them being a hate march. I mean, if you've got people chanting slogans in line with Hamas, if you've got anti-Semitic comments being made, then that is incitement to violence, and so that should not be allowed. I mean, I take your point that obviously in terms of operational policing, if the law is being broken and there's a sufficiently large number of people breaking the law, that the practicalities for the police of dealing with that on the spot might be challenging. But then, of course, there is also a lot of video footage, and I think there would be concern that we haven't even had many people being pursued afterwards. I don't even remember the riots in London in August 2011. The police seemed to be sort of standing by and letting people loot shops, and it was pretty frustrating. But then at least there were a substantial number of arrests afterwards, once people were identified through the wonders of modern technology. And so far, that doesn't seem to be happening either. So, but I take your point that the operational matters for policing these large events are pretty challenging.
It's interesting hearing the comments of Yvette Cooper. I mean, she's been excoriating. She said no other Home Secretary of any party would have taken the position that Suella Braverman has taken. The I newspaper this morning quoting a member of the Conservative Party cabinet saying a serving Tory minister say that her job is to calm things down. Instead, they accuse her of fueling anger amongst the far right. I mean, we talk about problems within the Labour Party, but I wonder if Suella Braverman is making things worse within the Conservative Party by breaking ranks in this way.
Oh, I think that's a bit over the top. There's some of those comments. I mean, we've had controversial marches and concerns about them breaking into violence and disorder for decades, if not centuries. So, in that sense, there's nothing new about the dilemma. I mean, I think what is important is for people on both sides to have consistency with groups that you agree with or disagree with, and I think that is partly about understanding free speech. I mean, free speech is that people should be allowed to express their views and not be locked up unless they're inciting violence. But it doesn't mean you've got an unlimited right to sort of force those views on other people. I mean, I don't think that if I was to say, right, I'm going to walk up and down Whitehall very slowly and spend all day doing it and disrupt the traffic, and that's my free speech. So that would be reasonable or proportionate. I think these things have to be done in cooperation with the police, with the permission of the authorities, discussing the date and the route of the protest, and they should be even-handed about that. But it's not an unlimited right to do that, regardless of the consequences for the rest of the public.
OK, Harry Phibbs, thanks very much indeed for coming on this morning.
Thanks.
I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I have to say, I'm not comfortable with the march.
OK.
Because because of when it's happening. I think that's quite distasteful. However, this is a country where protests are allowed, and you can't only allow protests that you agree with.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is concern over stuff, if there is stuff which is specifically anti-Semitic. Obviously, that's got to be addressed.
Illegal behaviour, that has to be policed. But I think we have to also be very careful about allowing the police to be operationally independent of government. Government have a very clear position on this. But, at one point yesterday, I think when the Prime Minister was hauling in the Met Commissioner, there were questions about whether or not this was interference. And obviously the Met Commissioner was able to convince the Prime Minister that the threshold had not been met legally, based on intelligence that they had gathered, for it to be closed down. And the Prime Minister seemed to be satisfied by that. But do we want to live in a country where the government decide who can and cannot protest? Probably not. Interesting, one of the organisers of an event for Armistice Day on this weekend, they're called the Western Front Association, and they hold commemorations for the fallen of the First World War. And they've said, we believe in democracy and we believe in free speech. And they think, as long as there isn't any disorder that goes anywhere near their commemorations, then, live and let live.